Welcome to Discover You, an inspiring podcast exploring cutting-edge solutions to our everyday psychological challenges. We explore complex mental health issues and talk to professionals, experts, and renowned authorities at the forefront of transformative healing. Our mission is to educate and destigmatize, and to ultimately view mental health as a proactive quest for optimized living and equilibrium, rather than mere crisis intervention. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Discover You podcast, in which we seek to illuminate and destigmatize the various conditions that we struggle with at mental health facilities. And today we will explore a fascinating topic, interventions, and we're joined by an illustrious guest, Vicky Lucas, who is an outstanding interventionist, both in regards to folks who are struggling with chemical dependency, as well as an interventionist for those who struggle with mental health. Vicky has over 18 years of experience doing interventions in the field of recovery. She specializes in mental health crisis interventions in addition to interventions for substance use disorder. And Vicky's own struggles in navigating recovery inspired her to found her company, Equanimity Interventions. She's been sober for over 23 years. And the mental health interventions is something that is of particular interest to me because at Montare, we treat both, high acuity patients who are coming with psychosis and who clearly have the, who know that they need to check themselves into a facility. But then you have a lot of folks who are high functioning. They can use 24-hour treatment. It will enhance the quality of their life. But there's a certain ambiguity that might delay the process of seeking help for treatment. And therefore, interventions to help expedite that process, to bring awareness, to bring clarity is so vital and important. And you don't have a lot of folks who are out there doing it. And Vicky, you're one of the best in the field. We'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and what led you to do this incredible work as an interventionist. And how does your personal journey inform the way you work with your clients?
Thank you, JD. It's so great to be on the show. And thank you for calling me one of the best in the field. I'm certainly, there's some great interventionists out there. I work with quite a few of them. I working, especially, the difference, I'm thinking right now of the difference between substance abuse and mental health. And with substance abuse, you have a problem. Even if you're in denial, there's a problem. With mental health, I would say 90% of the people I work with don't think they have a problem. There's a medical term for it. I can't think of it right now, but so I'm up against working with somebody that thinks it's everybody else and there's nothing wrong with them. They can't see that anything's wrong. And that's not manipulation or a form of denial as an addict would have. It's a real thing. They really believe nothing's wrong with them. So mental health interventions are absolutely my favorite, although I do a lot of substance abuse. I have 23 years clean myself. And I've had a lot of friends that have died because an intervention didn't happen, or for various reasons, or because there weren't enough boundaries with the family. That's a thing I come up against with substance abuse interventions, is the boundaries with the families and not wanting their kids to die. So they think by having their family members at home, they can save them when they're actually just loving them to death. Or when they come home right from treatment, they think they can go right back to their normal lives and they let the boundaries go. And oftentimes people relapse and, the results aren't great. And I'm sorry, what was the question? The first question that you asked?
You actually stimulated another question altogether, and I'll get back to the original question in a moment. But you're highlighting that when it comes to chemical dependency, the families are really they're so scared, and rightfully so, that their loved ones on the street might lose their lives. So they think, let's kill them with kindness. But that actually is a disservice, because they're not allowing them to have the gift of desperation to seek out the help that they really need. So would you say that you find less resistance from the families when it comes to mental health in regards to doing the intervention?
Yeah, they're so different, JD. I mean, when I hear about interventionists that work with a lot of SUD interventions, and they're going out to do a mental health intervention, and then I hear that they're reading the letters and doing a certain model, I personally just don't believe that works really for mental health. Boundaries work for everybody. And yes, there is less resistance from the families with mental health clients, because most often they've been living with it and working with it for so long, and they've already seen so many doctors. They've got psychiatrists in their lives and therapists in their lives. And more frequently than not, I'm dealing with somebody that quit taking their medications, refuses to go back on them, and has cycled back in to their mental health. So the family's already very, very educated. And when they call me in, it's usually at the point where I'm having to get creative enough to work with the identified patient to get them in. It's not as clear cut as a substance abuse intervention. It's very, very different.
And I'm sure it's so much more customized, because when it comes to chemical dependency, the symptoms are virtually identical, albeit with distinctions and differences in what chemical, what drug of choice it might look like. But we are talking about the same disorder. Mental health is such a broader arena that you probably have to really customize the intervention with a lot more strategic legwork prior to the intervention taking place. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I will tell you that with both types of interventions, I'm getting emails from the family, all the family members, even ones that aren't going to be involved. I want history, and I ask them to do that with autonomy. And I don't share the information that I get from one family member with another family member. I allow them their space to be honest. Especially, when there is mental health and substance abuse, actually, oftentimes we've noticed there's childhood trauma, right? So I want everybody to be able to be honest with what's really going on with the family dynamics. With mental health, there is a lot more homework to do because I have to find a way in. Substance abuse is we're all manipulative, right? We all need that gift of desperation. We're all doing the finding ways and means of getting more, which we learn about in treatment. There's so many things that are so much alike in substance abuse with every client and every family, with the codependency and everything. With mental health, there is, I'm not saying that people have the choice to be an addict, an alcoholic, but we do have a choice, especially once we've put down the substance. We have a choice whether we're going to pick up or not again. In mental health, I don't feel like mental health clients really have a choice. And yes, they have the choice to stop taking their meds when they're stable. However, there's still something more going on, right? And I'm working with a client right now that the childhood trauma is so painful to even hear about. And it's no wonder why she's at where she's at. But that information didn't come from the family member. It came from a friend. And if I hadn't allowed everybody to feel honest, and then an aunt told me, but if I hadn't opened up the space for everybody to be honest and know that the information wasn't going to be shared, I would have never known that. And now knowing what her history is, I'm able to better place her and talk to her in a different type of a way and work with her from a different angle.
Sure. So the interventions with regards to mental health, it wouldn't necessarily be limited to them going to treatment. Sometimes you're saying that the intervention might have the goal and the sole objective of resuming your medication regimen, or attending an outpatient facility, or re-engaging with a clinician. Right.
It doesn't always have to be residential treatment. There is a plan for everybody. And I believe when we're doing interventions, it's our job to really listen and pay attention and engage the family in a plan, and to hear the identified patient also. Because oftentimes it's not just I show up and the intervention's done. Sometimes it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks. And sometimes I have to hear it all the time. I have to hear everybody, including the identified patient.
That's fascinating. So the intervention can actually occur over a lengthy period of time. It's not just a one-time event.
No, nor should it be. So I do a 6-month contract. And the reason I do that is so that if it doesn't work the first time and I get the patient in, I have 6 months to work with it and they only have to pay me one time. It allows everybody to be able to relax, to work the patient into it, to set up the boundaries and go for a few weeks and see how they do with boundaries stuck in place. Because not every patient believes that their codependent parents are suddenly going to stick to boundaries. So I get to support the families and I get to support the patient and I get to hear the patient and say, hey, look, if you don't think you're ready for residential, I hear you in that. Let's try this. And I want you to sign a contract with me that if that doesn't work, that you're going to go to residential. And everybody in this intervention right now is listening and they're going to watch you sign this contract and everybody else is going to sign as a witness. And in doing that, even when I know that it's not going to work for them, I just give them the opportunity to try it. And when it doesn't work, then they've made their choice to go into treatment. And a lot of times it just needs to be their choice because they're so hammered by everybody else and what everybody else wants them to do. Sometimes you have to trick them into thinking it's their decision, but it's still the plan.
Yeah,
we just
you want them to feel like they're in the driver's seat. They have to be in the driver's seat. Yeah.
And it's fair to let them feel that.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. We'd love to hear, how did you get into this space? And before you tell us, our listeners, a little bit about your journey and what you're comfortable sharing, how old is the notion, is this, what the history of mental health interventions? I mean, interventions for chemical dependency, substance use disorder have been around forever. But with regards to mental health, is this a recent thing or is it just gaining more traction as mental health awareness continues to become more mainstream?
I would say it's pretty new and there's more awareness. I'm sure it's happened in the past. I have to be honest with you. I've always done substance abuse interventions up until I took this on as my sole career, not doing anything else. And then I did a few crisis interventions and I found out I was really good at them. I always tell my clients, I always wanted to be an actress and here I get to, because oftentimes you have to step into playing a role with these patients to earn their trust. I mean, I'm just going to tell you real quickly. I had a patient that was homeless out in Oregon and he thought that he thought he was teleporting and he thought he had discovered that and that's what he was doing. He honestly thought that if he ran out into the middle of the street and got hit by a car, that it would be okay because he'd just teleport into another dimension. So in order to get him to trust me and to go with me to treatment, I told him that I met him in the future, his future self, and that he asked me to come back and save him. And there was just no other way to get through to this kid. And so there's a complete extreme difference. I had one girl, methamphetamine induced psychosis, total substance abuse issue, but mental health as well, right? Because now we're talking psychosis and her psychosis had been going on for so long. And I went into her house and she was spinning the earth. She said she had to keep making the earth rotate. It couldn't. So I sat there and did it with her while I was talking to her. I just went right along for the ride, and I gained her trust and got her to go into treatment. And so this is like such a huge difference with clients with behavioral health. And then there are those ones that you can sit down and the family just says, we can't live like this anymore. And if you're not willing to get help, we can't really, we can't have you here because it's too hard on all of us. So,
what you're saying, you reminded me of, Ronald Reagan was once asked, how does it feel to be a president after having been an actor? To which he responded that he quite frankly said, I don't know how you can be a president without being an actor. So you're kind of
you're kind of filling in and saying, you don't know how you could be an interventionist without being an actress. And I love that. That's especially poignant because for so many of these folks who are struggling with mental health issues, the lines of reality and fiction are so blurred that acting is rather appropriate when trying to make headway. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I sort of view the role of intervention as to just find somebody at home. It's not necessarily clinical in nature, although it has a lot of clinical undertones. But sometimes there's just nobody home to even begin the dialogue, begin the conversation in the clinical journey. And this is that right. Creation of a space, of a foundation upon which all clinical, psychiatric, therapeutic, holistic work can then begin to take effect. But you need somebody home, and that's where sort of the intervention comes from. Would you say that's an adequate description?
Absolutely.
Wow.
What I do, like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a clinician by any means. However, I could probably diagnose somebody just as well from the years of experience. But the good side to that of not being a therapist or a clinician with what I do, I'm able to work with them and kind of step into their world and play make-believe with them for a while so that I can earn their trust. I've taken guns off people. I've done a lot of things and a lot of different interventions. And it's, I'm not a cookie cutter interventionist because I don't believe that addiction or mental health is cookie cutter as much as we like to think it is. I mean, addiction, yeah, there's a lot of the same manipulation, methamphetamine addicts. We see a lot of the same kind of psychosis. They talk about a lot of the same things repetitively. I can almost identify immediately when somebody's on methamphetamine just by the stories that the family's telling me. Mental health, there's just so many things that are so different. And I feel like I need to be able to just step in and step up and do whatever it takes to get these people to treatment. And also I'm their first experience. So I don't want it to be a bad experience. I want it to be a good experience because I'm their introduction into treatment. They work with me and then they walk in and they work with intake. So I don't want them to feel, and also if I need to keep working with them over that 6-month period, there needs to be this mutual respect going on. They need to trust me. They need to be able to work with me. Some clients leave treatment early, as you know, and I have to show up back to the house to get them. I need to be able to have their trust so that they'll come outside and sit down and have a conversation with me about going back to treatment. People relapse into mental health or using substances. I need to be able to show up again in that 6-month period and be able to talk them back into treatment. So there's so many aspects that go along with an intervention. So many people think it's just about showing up and doing letters and setting boundaries and then your job's done, but it's not. I mean, to be honest with you, JD, getting somebody into treatment is not the hard part. It's getting them to stay and what happens when they go back home. So if all interventionists would set up a plan where they're part of that aftercare, they can be part of the beginning and part of the, the next few months when they come home. I feel like clients have a better chance.
Totally. And, I the way I see it, it's actually almost like an advantage that you're not a clinician because they, by nature of the intervention, they're resisting clinical intervention. They're resisting treatment. So if you come in as the clinician, they're looking at you right off the bat as you're a part of the problem. But then you come along with a PhD in life wisdom and with, exuding authenticity. And this is something that they might not have written off, and they're much more receptive to listening to someone like yourself. When did you realize this is what you wanted to do in life? You referenced that this is your sole pursuit right now. This is your calling. This is all you do. At what point did the paradigm shift click and say, you know what? This is not just a nice hobby, a side hustle. This is not just something that I do on Wednesdays. This is what I do every day. When did that happen? And was it the result of a certain episode or experience?
Well, when I worked let me take it back a little bit. When I worked at the Camp Recovery Center I think 18 years ago, and you had asked me a little bit about me prior. So I have 23 years. I don't know if I mentioned that, sober, clean, however you want to identify. So when I worked in treatment, I created a position, the detox counselor, and I was working with the people that were in there just in a bunch of pain and not wanting to be there and all the grief and the shame. And I would do groups with them before they went into the residential part of the camp. And then when people would try to AMA, the director back then, Paige Bottom, which I feel so lucky to have had her as a mentor, she would have me do the AMA blocking. I was just good at it. I was just really good at it. And in Narcotics Anonymous, I've always been the one that hung out with newcomers and went and took them to coffee. People have gotten clean on my couch. So having said all that, it was just always innately in me. It's what I do. So I went through years of being a union electrician, got a traumatic brain injury, a back injury, couldn't do that anymore, went to school to be a respiratory therapist, couldn't do 12 hours a day on my feet. So I was still doing some interventions, but morally, I was having a problem charging people because I was thinking of it as like it was a 12-step. And it's not. I do much more work than you would ever do going out and 12-stepping somebody. So as I started doing them, I didn't charge much money, and I just wanted to make sure that I got into it and got into it right, and I was doing it well, and I met all the right people and some other great interventionists that I learned from. And I just went in head first about 5 years ago and said, this is all I'm going to do. And I'm doing about 3 interventions a week now.
Wow.
And I've had to slow it down a little bit and realize that it's okay. You know, I've got other interventionists that I will work with that I trust, like Susan Mehta or Eric and Evan. I mean, they're great interventionists also. And we all, when we're busy, will work together to make sure a client gets the right kind of intervention, the family's getting what they need. And we're all really fair.
A couple of rapid fire questions as we segue into the next part of the show. And these have to do with, just questions that I feel a lot of our listeners and viewers would be very interested in. So first and foremost, do you service the entire country? Is it local? Is it abroad? What's the scope of the distance that you go to?
There is no distance. I go everywhere.
Amazing. And if somebody were to call you and say, COVID, pandemic, can we do this via Zoom? What's your yes or no answer?
Oh, I've done plenty via Zoom during the pandemic. I've talked to people on the phone and done it, but I'll still do it in person. We'll just go out. During the pandemic, we went outside and 6 feet apart, masks on. Yeah. I wore a shield and I still did. And you know what? Half the time I would stand even further apart and take my mask off because I just, I feel for these people, and I just feel like with the mask and everything, it just feels really impersonal. Yeah. Yes. Could not agree with you more. Yeah. The face is so revealing. There's so much depth and there's so much richness and there's so much expression that has to be expressed. Right. What would your message to the family be in advance of when an intervention is necessary? If you were talking to families of those struggling with mental health, when is the time for them to call you? I would ask, well, that would be the admissions team and the people working with the families to say, why don't you call Vicky? If they tried a couple times and the client is the patient's absolutely no, I'm not going, I'm not doing that, that would be the time. Because if they continue to ask and it goes on for too long, what's going to happen is the wall gets bigger and it gets thicker and there's more excuses. So getting them early on with the first, 2 or 3 no's is probably a good time for me to step in. Interesting. That's a great takeaway, a great measuring stick. If the family's trying and it's too many times and there's resistance building, time to call Vicky. Right.
How do people find out more about the intervention, the process? Is there a website?
I actually don't have a website. I'm afraid if I put one up, I'm going to get way busier. But I do have on Facebook, Equanimity Interventions on Facebook. You can find me. Also, you can Google me. I'm on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle for an intervention I did. And with most of the clients, if they're wondering, I mean, anybody can have a great website. That's my philosophy on that. We can all have beautiful websites. But what I do is I offer my clients about 10 phone numbers of families that I've worked with, and also people in the field that I've worked with, so that they can get personal references. I think that's the best way to go about it.
For sure. When is an intervention not a good idea, if ever?
I don't know, because I haven't, every phone call I've gotten, I think they've been screened pretty well by treatment facilities that it's always been a good idea. I don't know that it's always a good idea. I don't know that the family's plan is always the best idea for the identified patient. But I don't think an intervention ever hurts anybody. I think it's good work for the loved ones of the identified patient. I think a lot of good work can come out of it no matter what.
Without names, of course, is there any colorful story that stands out in all your years of intervention as just being like off the charts?
Besides the one where I said I traveled in time, yeah, there was one. I can give a good one. I got a phone call from a family member. This guy's mom was really old, and he's in methamphetamine induced psychosis out in the middle of nowhere. He had just been arrested with a sawed-off shotgun. He thought aliens landed on his family's property. He was honestly just trying to protect the family. Anyways, we set up an intervention. He wasn't there at the intervention, so I went out and looked for him. I told the family, stay here. I'm going to go look for him. His girlfriend at the time said, oh, he's hitchhiking. He goes this way. So I drive down. I had seen his picture on Facebook. I do my homework. I always look at who I'm going to be intervening with. So I'd been aware of what he looked like. And I was down this old highway, and I pull up to a stop sign, and he pops out with his thumb up, all sweaty, looking like he's on methamphetamine, a backpack with all these trinkets hanging off of it. And I said, I was in a brand new Mercedes. I said, get in the car. He said, what? You're going to give me a ride? I said, yeah, jump in the car. I got you. So he jumps in the car, and he says, this is my lucky day. And I said, oh, you have no idea. And he just started, I was watching him through the rearview mirror. I had him sit in the back seat, and he goes, do you know about the Illuminati? And I said, oh, I've heard of it. And he goes, oh, you know not to talk about it. And he did this, and I did this back. And then I said, look, I just told him what was going on. Family intervention, opportunity to go to treatment. He started bawling. He melted right there in the back of the car, and he went to treatment. But,
wow.
Yeah, but that's one of, there's so many. I mean, I've taken a gun off of a gangbanger and had to walk out of the room with it down my pants. And I mean, there's crazy stories. There's plenty.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yep.
Nothing quite that prepares you for the role, besides for the experiential journey.
Yeah, it definitely is not a job for the thin-skinned. I've been called all kinds of names and swung at, and all of it. And then, the worst interventions, the hardest interventions are the ones where the clients die, because either they don't go, or they go and come back, and the family's boundaries fall apart, and they die.
Yeah.
They continue down their path, and then everybody feels like they're to blame when nobody is. It's that disease. Those are the hardest.
So yeah, definitely. If a client calls you up, or the family of a client calls you up, that's actually more likely the scenario. So the family calls you up and they say, Vicky, what are the chances that this is going to work? What's your response? What's the success rate?
Well, I think in the 5 years I've been doing them, I've had like 8 clients that haven't gone at all. And so what I tell them is, the truth is, with the right boundaries and everything set in place, they're going to hopefully go. Not everybody goes. So if I said everybody goes, that would be a lie. Because there are those that are okay with being homeless and living on the streets and don't ever want to get clean. That does exist. However, most of the time, when the families set up boundaries and stick with them, that's why I do the 6-month contract. It might not happen on day 1, but it's probably going to happen within 2 or 3 weeks.
That is so encouraging, because so many people think, or even take the approach, that we're going to give it all we got, and if we're not successful, then that's that, and we close the book. But your approach is different. It's a longer term approach, and it's taking into account that sometimes it takes a while, and you got to dig deeper to break the walls of resistance. And that's quite amazing. And God bless you for the amazing work that you've done. Thank you so much, really, for joining us and for helping our listeners and viewers understand that there are resources out there, not just for chemical dependency, but for mental health, and not just, in the hopes that this is somehow going to have a magical outcome after the first page of the intervention, but that it can be comprehensive and lengthy, because it will yield results. And that's an amazingly optimistic way of doing it, and effective one. So thank you, Vicky, for your work that you do for humanity, and thank you for joining us today. And we really are so grateful.
Thank you, JD. Nice to finally see your face.
Yes, wonderful. And with that, we will conclude this amazing episode of the Discover You podcast about the efficacy and the importance of interventions, not only in the chemical dependency arena, but for those who are struggling with depression and anxiety and a host of other mental health challenges that so many of our loved ones are experiencing. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.